This podcast contains potentially adult language, adult themes, definitely drinking, and possibly sexual context. Listener discretion is advised. Yay! Technology, and I'm its friend. This is Drinking with Authors. Go me! I'm your host, Erica Lance. You'd think I do this professionally. I don't. My co-host today is...
Mark Muncy from Erie, Florida.
And our amazing guest today is the one, the only, Max Gladstone. Woo!
Hey, where is he? Oh shit, that's me. Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Listen, I told you I paid you $5. Be Max Gladstone. Okay. Yep. We talk about what we're drinking. I am drinking. I decided I don't have my swag today, but I have a vanilla porter by Breckenridge Brewery. I promise this is the first one. It doesn't. That's what's happening. Mark, what are you drinking?
I am on my seizure meds tonight, so okay. I'm sticking with the coffee. So I have another Coffee Shop of Horrors classic, the I Want to Believe, which is their banana cream. And oh my gosh, is it amazing.
I don't think I've had their banana cream.
Oh my God, it's to die for, literally. This is
tell me about this. Is that like a roast or a bean, or is that
they grind it there, they make their own coffees. It's
fantastic.
Based out of Central Florida. They have a couple locations and they do all kinds of fun flavors, and they tribute a bunch of them to various authors. They have going back, Bram Stoker, Lifetime winner. We had him on a few episodes ago. They had just made one of his collection of short stories, Tribal Screams, into a Florida coffee, and it's incredible. So
that's so cool. Wow.
Max, hypothetically, you call them, they'll make a coffee for you. That's how they
pretty much. They're making an Erie, Florida coffee, so they'll let anybody get one. So yeah.
Don't undersell. You're so exclusive. You've got your own coffee now.
That's exactly. Great. Yeah, at some point.
I swear, Mark, if we do one of these episodes and you're like, what am I drinking today? I'm drinking my own coffee.
You're in Florida. Yes. Don't you wish you were like me?
Yeah.
Yours for the low price of 3 installments of $19.99. Yes. You can Venmo me at... Yeah.
There'll be a link included with this podcast on how you order. Max, what are you drinking?
After our Skillshare referral. What am I... Sorry.
That was gold.
I am working on the end of a Lefroy Quarter Cask right here, which is really nice. I picked this one up on the way back from the UK, back when leaving our houses was still a thing that we did. And yeah, I've been nursing it for a while. And
wow. I
might hit the end of the bottle during this podcast. I might not. We'll see.
Well, it's more likely than not around us. I will say that it's funny because there's a gin that I absolutely love that you can only get in Spain. So anytime I go over or my friends go over to any airport, because it's in the airports too, but they bring me back, and I literally ran out 2 days ago of this gin, and it made me so sad. And I was like, what is the likelihood I could at least get to the airport before they kicked me back out again from anywhere?
Yeah, I've never been in a situation for years where there was a real risk of me running out of scotch. Now, we have an excellent liquor store that pivoted really well early in the pandemic to doing delivery. I trust them enormously, and they have proven more than willing to drop large crates of wine off at my house. So I think a whiskey run is, they're doing the running, I guess. I think that's in my near future, but it's a sort of sad testament to how long this thing has lasted when the liter bottles start running empty. The big old thing of body wash that you got at the beginning of the pandemic needs, it's like... But we press on endlessly against the current, as the man says.
We were talking actually earlier, because I said it was funny. We all knew this wasn't going to magically go away. Well, most of us. That's what I'm going to say. Most of us didn't think that.
The year of magical thinking.
Yeah, exactly. But it's interesting because as this year has started off and things are still not great with COVID at all, like the opposite actually, now that we're having new strains. I have an office in the UK, and I always tell the guy there, I'm like, So could you not be number one at this thing of creating new viruses? Can you pick something else to be number one at? Right? And I was saying that it reminds me of Ghostbusters 2, that slime under the city that's just growing. That no, I was like, that's what I feel like is happening.
Yeah.
And
Starts
so Mark
leaking out. Yeah.
Mark aptly said we just all need to sing.
Your love,
you know,
keeps keeping
and that
me
will solve the
higher.
problem.
That's true. That's true. I mean, you know, I saw Katy Perry sing Fireworks a couple of nights ago. That's you know,
Exactly.
Fireflies, food for the soul.
There you go.
Okay, Max, you're an author now that we've gotten all this out of the way.
I have been so accused.
Yes, that's what I heard. Do you want to tell anybody who is in a dark, dingy hole, aka their house, that doesn't know who you are, a little bit about your writing?
Slimy, my home this is. Yeah, totally. Let's see. If I were, you know, real grown-up, responsible, marketing-forward author, I would have all of my books right back here to point at. Instead, I have Douglas Adams and Brian Staveley's last book and Moby Dick. But here's the, I do have the Spanish edition of Last First Snow, which is the first/fourth novel in the craft sequence here, which I just love this cover. It's so great.
It's awesome.
It's shrink wrapped. They sell books shrink wrapped, which is extremely cool. So, and here is the cover of the novella that Amal El-Mohtar and I co-wrote. This is How You Lose the Time War, which won Hugo and Nebula and a bunch of stuff last year. Hugo and Nebula, the Fire Phoenix Award. I have a rock from the Shirley Jackson people, which is so cool. When you're nominated, they send you a rock. I love that. It's a rock. Shirley Jackson. Apparently, we didn't get to go to the nomination ceremony at ReaderCon because there was no ReaderCon in person this year. But what they do is they have the nominee party, and then somebody walks around saying, you know, congratulations on your Shirley Jackson nomination. Here is your rock. The idea is to, I think, get the person who wins a little nervous and looking for the exits come Sunday. But it's just the coolest thing. So so I am a fantasy and science fiction author and game designer and sometimes screenwriter. I have written, in addition to This Is How You Lose the Time War, which is, and other most recent book, which I will come back with a copy of. See, they're all in the office. They're just not conveniently located. Right. Empress of Forever, which giant galaxy hopping Technicolor 80s synthwave soundtrack space opera. And also the craft sequence of post-industrial fantasy novels. I was calling them urban fantasy for a really long time before that urban fantasy kind of locked very specifically into the thing that it is now, which is an awesome thing, but is very much like our world with monsters. Whereas what I'm doing is a secondary fantasy world that's at a stage of cultural and technological development where they're confronting a lot of the problems that our world is confronting. Like, you know, what do you do in post-industrial society? How do you have a world that isn't ruled by kings and gods anymore, that is something like equitable? How do you confront climate change and the challenge of late capitalism? How do you create meaning in a universe like that? How do you stop people from poisoning your local undead god that you chopped up and made into your water treatment facility? You know, like that kind of stuff that people confront every day. Yeah. So that was
what the Land Commission is for.
Yeah, so that starts with 3 Parts Dead, and then the most recent book in that series. Oh, here's great. We got 5 novels here. Ooh. This is cool. This is the omnibus that Tor published of all of the different ebooks. So you can't get it in print, but they're all there. And then this is Ruin of Angels, the cover of the 6th book. Oh, very cool. A lot of fun. And then I've written a couple of interactive fiction pieces. This is not a capsule intro, I'm so sorry. I've written a couple of interactive fiction pieces, like sort of interactive books, like choose your own adventure style, choose your own path style things, set in the world of the craft sequence, Choice of the Deathless and Deathless, the City's Thirst. And I also created a piece of interactive television called Wizard School Dropout, which is extremely cool, which is working with Sandeep Parikh of Effin' Funny Productions, that came out on Echo like towards the end of 2019. So I think it's out there if anybody's stuck in their home and wants to play an interactive story about an upbeat, spunky young wizard from a magic school type of universe who decides, screw it, leaves magic school and has to go and make her way in Los Angeles, paying rent and figuring out how mundane society works.
Oh my God, that sounds fun. And that's on Echo?
Yeah, that's on Echo, EKO.
Well, very cool. Look at all that stuff.
I keep busy. Oh, and then there's Cereal Box, Bookburners, and Which Who Came In From the Cold, 2 serials that I've been involved with and that are extremely great. One is a magic spies story, and one is a sort of working for the Vatican, trying to stop evil books from taking over the world. Great, really cool collaborative projects, both of them.
That is awesome. Okay, so you've done a couple things. You know, a couple things.
I think a lot of people have or I think almost everyone in this business just has their fingers in so many pies right now. I just machine gun them at people when they ask me about them.
No, I think it's true, and I think it's great to hear the breadth of create that you've done. Like, I think that's phenomenal. But let's grab our beer and go back to the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
Where did we begin? Where did this all start, this writer-ness that you have pontificated on? Look at me.
Oh, man.
Big words. I'm using marker. No, you're impressed.
I was
right
like,
there.
that was 5 syllables.
Right.
Jeez.
Yeah.
I have to find my surplice and my miter. Is the miter the staff? It feels like it should be. It's the thing that you smite people with, right? But I think a miter's the coat, isn't it?
I think the miter is the the
Cody kind of Stoley thing.
Yeah. Oh my God.
Is there a name for the staff, or is it just a staff?
It's something like, oh gosh. Oh, now my history.
All right. Okay. Anyway,
Third diversion.
I'm failing at Episcopalian here.
Sorry.
No. So, gosh, I mean, I've been writing since way before I can remember. Like, my parents tell stories about finding me with notebooks, like coloring in the notebooks, but coloring inside the lines, like I was writing in cursive in the notebooks before I could read or write. Speaking of before one could read or write, that's actually my son knocking on the door right now. He's just under 2. So I'm going to go sneak off, sing him to sleep.
We'll take a quick break. We'll be right back.
All right. See you in a sec.
Sample locally sourced, quality distilled spirits in the beautiful Columbia River Gorge. At Skunk Brothers Distillery, we're family-owned, brewing small batch grain to bottle spirits, just like our grandfather did back in the Prohibition era. From handcrafted bourbons and moonshine to flavored blends and cordials infused with local fruit. Join us for a tasting tour and buy Skunk Brothers Spirits straight from the source.
It's all in the family at Skunk Brothers Spirits, located in Stevenson, Washington.
Okay, and we're back. We were just talking about the many ways Michael Biehn has died. So
That's what we were talking while you were off.
That's good.
They just announced him as a guest at a convention coming up that we're excited for. So we're.
Oh, fantastic. Michael Biehn, Sean Biehn? Is there
Michael
just
Biehn.
Michael Biehn?
He was killed. He was in the Terminator and killed. He was Corporal Hicks in Aliens.
Oh, wow. Okay, wow. Yeah, there are a lot of Biehn deaths going around then.
Yeah, a lot of them die a lot. I wouldn't have that name in like.
Yeah, Michael Biehn and Sean Biehn, they tend to die quite a bit. Yeah.
Yeah. No, totally. Okay. So we were talking about your origin story. Look how I did that.
So my origin story is just that, I always really loved writing. I liked telling stories. I liked writing them down. I liked reading them. I liked everything about the process. In late high school, so I moved from doing... When I say fan fiction, I feel a little odd because that term has such a very specific set of meanings and cultures around it right now, here where I'm sitting in early 2021, that at least it didn't have when I was initially getting involved in it, at least the way that I was getting involved in it in the mid to late 90s. So at that point, no, nothing wrong with what's going on now. I'm extremely happy to see all of the many profusive different ways that fan fiction has changed shape and become things, and the different faces that it's presented over the years. But I got in through Alt Starfleet RPG and that kind of work on Usenet, right? Where these would be sort of Usenet forum games where you were not role playing in the sense that you were rolling dice, but role playing in the sense that you were writing a story about what your character was doing. So I had a character on that for a really long time and loved writing for that small sort of role playing audience that way, and moved from there to doing stuff that I would still call fan fiction, even though it wasn't in established universes. Like the old Electric Ferret comic book universe battles site, if you remember that at all. This is like,
wow.
Yeah, so this is Mists of Time stuff, right?
Deep cut.
Yeah, it feels like it for me. So there was a tiny little adjunct to that site called the Fantasy Powers League for a while, where Serge, the guy who ran Sebub, would he built this little PHP system where you could create your own superheroes and then have them battle each other. And so it turned rapidly into, because the system was very simple, it turned rapidly into a kind of competitive creative writing exercise. So you're trying to create characters who weren't so much like going at it in the gladiatorial arena as create characters who were like ontologically impossible to defeat, or who are just so interesting that you never wanted them to lose, in the same way you don't really want like Batman to lose to Darkseid, even though Darkseid is like literally a god and Batman is like a cool guy with daddy issues. Like you just don't. Anyway, so it was really fun, and I got involved in that, created some characters there, and then started getting involved in the fiction scene that was sort of burgeoning around it. And toward the end of high school, I wrote this 200,000 some odd word novel that was basically a bring out your dead kind of situation. I asked everybody who was involved any characters that they had that they didn't mind or wanted to get rid of, or wanted to have go out in some sort of big over the top heroic fashion in a grand apocalyptic crossover scenario. Just kick them my way and I'll roll them into this thing. And I did this big apocalypse event for the site, and it was enormous fun. And at the end of it, it was like a year-long project for me, and people loved it. And I thought, wow, this was great. I think I did it really well. Like it's, you know, in a lot of ways, I'll go back to that writing and still be really excited by it, even though I'm, I think, a better writer now. And oh gosh, you know, people get paid for this. This is something that you can make a life out of. It's not like an easy life, but you can do it. Let's try. In addition to all the other things we're going to try, let's try that. So ever since, I never stopped trying to write novels, get them out, submit them, finish them, polish them. It's just always been something that I've loved doing.
I think, and that's the important part, is loving doing it.
Yes.
And having
exactly.
fun doing it. If you can do something you love in life, I think it's amazing. So
yeah, I think getting, I mean, like the sort of getting paid for it part at that point was just this realization. Oh wait, this is work. It's great work, and people are excited about it. That's a cool was a cool key to turn for me. But since then, I mean, if I were still writing books and not publishing them, or publishing them in an independent kind of way, or even just writing fiction stories and passing them around to friends, it's like I've become so appreciative since I started doing the game commercially of the personal and artistic value of just sitting down with the keyboard for a long period of time, that there's a daily practice, and there's something really healing and cool and enormously fun about telling stories for your friends to read, kind of whatever happens to them. That's a purity that I keep trying to connect back with, like a voltage I want to tap.
Very nice.
How often do you think you get to tap that when you're doing your writing?
That's a good question. There, you know, the hard part of every day that I'm sitting down and putting new words on the page, like once you break that initial barrier, the pen is down, your hands are on the keyboard, there comes this moment where the rest of the world really starts to melt away. And it's just you and the words and the moment. That, if you can get there, it's golden. And the challenge of growing up, the challenge of being in the business of it, and therefore starting to second guess your own intuitions about things, and wondering, did I, and also having done it a lot, like, did I do this differently last time? Should I be trying something else? You're always trying to push your own edges can start to make you self-conscious, make you doubt that moment. You can be overhearing yourself too much. It's like listening to your own voice on a few seconds delay.
Oh, wow.
I think that's and then that's where things starts to trip up. So it's this happy medium. You need to be able to bring your full creative attention and your full experience to bear on the story, but you want it to happen in such a way that it's all pointing in the same direction rather than carrying you off one direction or another. Eventually you learn to listen to that too. Like if you're starting to get distracted or if you're starting to have these real doubts, the question is like, what's the most interesting or audacious thing to do next? Or why am I feeling this way? Probably you're feeling this way because you're getting in your own way on some level. Maybe it's not the right scene that you're writing, even if it's the one that the outline says. Or maybe it's maybe you just need to step up and get a glass of water. Sometimes that happens. So it's,
No, do you follow your outline rigorously?
My process changes so much that it's hard to say. I've written books that were extremely rigorously like 3 or 4 paragraphs for a chapter outlined.
Mm-hmm.
I've written books where the outline was just a sheaf of index cards, and some of the index cards were like, they meet. And okay. At least it's at that point it starts to become like a structured improv exercise a little bit. You sort of know that this scene needs to happen and what the outcome needs to be, but you're perfectly at liberty to establish what happens in it, which is a fun place for me to play around in, because I'll just invent stuff on the page that goes together, and I'll know that the fundamental dramatic glue is there to hold the scene, as opposed to just kind of writing until I find a scene. I've this book that I'm getting close to finishing up right now is a complete stem to stern rewrite of a previous book, and I thought that I was initially going to be just rewriting the first chapter and gluing it together, but then I just kept writing it and letting things suggest themselves as they came. I was working a lot slower than I've worked on anything before because of new parenting and because I was trying to handwrite the whole project, and that was really cool. And I think slowing down gave new ideas more of a chance to emerge, which was a lot of fun. So that felt more like I don't know, I've never sailed much, but like the 1 or 2 times I've been out on like an actual sailboat in a lake, you sort of, you got to pay a lot of attention, but once in a while you can like catch the wind, or you can figure out what you're supposed to be doing, and then, oh man, it's like you're flying.
Totally.
So yeah, that's I don't know how well. I know how a lot of different writers do it. I know how, or at least how they talk about doing it in public. I think
we talk to a ton of writers. Everybody does it differently. There are some people that are but by nature, they're just rigorous to some form that they have to be in. Mm-hmm. Whatever that form is, they're sort of, it's religion to them almost. Like, I'm going to do this.
Very ritualistic. Yeah.
And then
there's some,
there are those that I am probably literally the worst at this, because the only time I ever do an outline, and it's not an outline, they're bullet points, not even like a sentence bullet points, but right. I'm like, okay, these things, I just got to not forget about these things, because I said in the last thing that I would mention these things, so I better mention them. But that's it. I'm like the worst at coming up, because when I do that, I find that I get stuck. If it's going in another direction, then I'm trying to follow I'm much better not following the map. Don't give me the map. I'll get there eventually.
I've often felt that way. But I've often felt that way, like resistant. I was resistant to outlining for those exact reasons. I started outlining when I was working on the Bookburners project, the cereal box serials, because you have a lot of different writers and you're all trying to coordinate around an overarching episodic story. So Margaret Dunlop, who was on that project, introduced us to some of the techniques that TV writers use in a writer's room to try to break a season. A lot of note cards, a lot of push pins and cork boards and all that. And I found it very liberating, because I could do a lot of the discovery writing at the note card stage, rather than rather than trying to rigorously like roadmap out what the story absolutely needed to be, I could have an idea for a scene. I could scribble it down in a note card and pop it up on the corkboard, and then think, oh, okay, how does it look? How does it look even written that way? Is that wrong? Maybe I can just tear up the note card and write a different one. You get that, once you get that seed crystal of the scene in your head, right? There's that, the way the whole thing kind of accretes on top of it, can accrete very quickly. You can kind of see, oh yeah, and then it'll be like on a boat, and boat's on fire, and there's, and then he's got to get the cross before he gets swept overboard. Okay, cool. Yeah, I see it. That's really cool. And then that doesn't need in its initial phase to be connected to anything, but you can start to see where that might fit into a cause and effect, or what story might connect with that scene. So you can do a lot of the discovery writing in this like really fast and loose playing around with things kind of way. And then that turns into an outline, at least when I'm doing it, it turns into an outline that's about jotting down what you think is really exciting about the scene, and like the kind of the texture of a fight that two characters might have over a plot issue or a relationship, the sudden revelation at the end of the scene. You're giving yourself enough to get excited when you sit down to do the brickwork and the carpentry to make it work, which then you get to turn on a different part of yourself, the part that's about making the scene interesting stylistically, or making the dialogue sing, or finding the right moment to enter this dramatic unit. So you kind of take all the big fun bolus of writing, or the orange, and you chop it up into little pieces, and then you peel it, and then you can use the peel, like you can sugar the peel for later consumption.
We're about to get into the Great British Baking Show here in a moment.
Yeah. I'm just saying, like they can, the one thing can, if approached in a particular way, be a whole bunch of different pieces and parts, all of which are useful in some way and can have their own particularities highlighted by deconstructing it in the kind of outlining fashion. Or you can just, eat the orange, probably not without peeling it, but.
You know what? I don't want you to judge me, okay?
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cast aspersions.
Okay. No, that's what we do.
But like, there's so much magic in this, and some people ritualize it. Yeah. And I often find myself ritualizing it and then breaking down the ritual later, realizing that maybe this particular, the thing that, I don't know, a lot of people that I know say is that you never really learn how to write. You just learn how to write this book, or you never learn how to write a book. You learn how to write this one. Yeah. And I think there is a lot of truth to that. You need to keep your ears open.
No, I think it's good to learn things. Like being a writer, I think sometimes people take for granted that, like any good craft of any kind, there has to be more education and more evolution on how you do it better.
You're absolutely right.
You can't just, take a typewriter to a cabin in the woods and, whatever, generate the next novel and only live off of saltines and whiskey. Like, although that sounds kind of cool.
Well, I mean,
wait a minute.
You need some lemon to avoid scurvy, and then you're fine.
Something. And you think that that's what happens, but it doesn't. And you have to find for me, I think it's important that writers find the way to keep going, even if they have to use multiple tricks to keep the writing going and keep themselves going and keep themselves in love with the writing they're doing. Because
I think you're absolutely right.
Yeah, it can get, especially if, it's different phases when, luckily for me at this stage, I have a couple series going that I have to keep going with, but I don't have, I'm the publisher, so I can't get yelled at by my publisher for diverging exactly. But when you're paid to write a book or paid to write a series or something, you have to produce something within the confines of kind of what you told them you were going to do or what they asked you to do.
Yeah.
You have to find ways to keep yourself motivated to do that,
That's true. I think that's one of the reasons that you do see people getting kind of mid-series and feeling a little trapped. Early, what's a very nice, not even nice so much as kind way to put this. Well, this is what's happened to me, and I've seen it happen to friends too. There's typically I'm curious whether this happened to you when you were publishing. There's sort of after the first book that gets published, there's this like crisis of identity, of vision, of practice or praxis or whatever you want to call it, that culminates in this anxiety depression kind of nexus. And that's in direct proportion to how big the first book broke. And I've seen it happen to a lot of people. I've seen a couple people evade it, generally people who had extremely good mental health resources in place beforehand, which was not where I was when Three Parts Dead came out. And my theory, my totally baseless, wild ass, I'm drinking whiskey on a Friday night theory, is that
Those are the best theories.
That's right. That's right. I just like, I'm not a medical professional. I'm not any kind of, I'm a professional making stuff up person. So, take that with your grain. Is that there's when you can do anything, you're Proteus. You get to change and transform. The next book can be anything that it has to be. You can tell any story that you want. Maybe you want to tell the same story that your D&D party ran through 10 years ago again and again and again. And that's fantastic. That's awesome. That's you. But nobody's telling you not to do that, or that like they want to hear something different from you next time. Nobody's going to be upset if you turn in like the same book with, it's between you and the people that you love or your beta readers, or hopefully that group has some coextension. Also, and conversely, if you want to like pop off and write a romance novel next, or if you've been writing romance novels all the time and your next dream is like extremely bloody Thomas Harris-esque psychological thriller, that's not a career decision, right? For you before you're out there in the public eye. It's just like, let's see this thing. And after your first book comes out, there is this sense of, you're a Proteus and you've been grappled. Like you need to be held until you stop changing shape in order to yield the thing that the system needs. And it's hard to figure out how to do the artistic thing, which is ultimately about, it's about a lot of stuff. It's about serving your reader. It's about people gathered around a table and being excited to listen to you tell a story or to hear a joke. It's about participating in a tradition of storytelling, of ritualized storytelling. It's about pushing the needle one step forward, like whatever it is that gets you, that brings you to the page, it's about that. But then it becomes about this other thing and about this whole bunch of strangers who you've never met before, who are now super excited about your next book or curious at the very least. And then you are also looking at yourself like, do those sales figures, does that reception, does that reflect what I am, who I am? Is that what I want? So that can be a real stumbling block for a lot of folks. It certainly was for me,
Well, I was going to ask you on your series, what I think is fascinating is how much fan input can potentially have depending on how engaged you are with your fans. Because it's funny when I sometimes see series that take turns in a direction, like they're going this way and then they slowly start turning and they're going this way. And I go, was this the author's choice? Was this the publishing house's choice? Or did just fan input going, I want to hear more about this, drive it? And I've talked to a lot of authors that talk about how the fans in a way kind of get excited about some part of it and they want to see some more of that part of it. So you're kind of like, okay, cool. I can write about that part of it. I can.
Yeah, you find yourself drawn, right? Oh, this excites people. Let's go for it. It is a bit of a, tightrope is maybe overselling it, but it's a tension that you have to negotiate, right? Because as in a writer's workshop scenario, a reader or a responder saying, I want to know more about this. I'm so interested in this aspect. I'm so interested in the monks. The monks are really cool. May mean that you have exactly the right amount of the monks in your story and that you do not need any more monks. That if you were to continue to explain, it would kind of cheapen them or dull the mystery.
We call that the midichlorian complex?
Yeah, I was about to say the Jedi are a perfect example of this. Like,
Oh, we can go down such a path about what I feel was done to Darth Vader by episodes 1, 2, and 3.
Yeah.
I
Man.
literally think they
Didn't
took
need
one of the
all that.
best bad guys in history and made him into a whiny asshole. And I was like,
They did him dirty. It's true.
Yep.
it was terrible because he was the epic, like you thought of bad guys. Wow, Darth Vader. He was
Darth
in
Vader.
the top list, top 5 every time.
That's right.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I think that is fascinating part about writing. So what influenced your decision on your series though? What drove the evolution of it? Did you always have the series in mind?
I always, well, from when I started writing Three Parts Dead, I knew that I wanted to write a fantasy series that was exploring a whole world. That's to say, I wanted to be able to move around. I wanted to be able to feature different characters from different backgrounds rather than the standard epic fantasy approach of having like your adventuring party that's the sort of, there's one elf and one dwarf and one tree person and whatever, and they're going to go to the elf city and the tree person city and the dwarf city, and then we're going to reach the conclusion, right? It's a perfectly fine formula
that everybody hates.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. It's a perfectly fun and good formula and spine. But the challenge there is you never, unless you're engaged in a project that's as creatively enormous as, I don't know, the Forgotten Realms universe or something like that, right? You don't get in the standard epic fantasy approach, like the book that's all about the elves from the elves' perspective while the big quest is going on. You don't have like the elf book, which means that you see this big and diverse and complicated fantasy universe from one normative perspective. You go to a place and like, this is where all the sneaky people live.
Yeah.
And that's a little weird for a lot of different reasons. And it also, but even taking it on its face, you got to wonder, like, what's it like to just be one of the sneaky people and hang out there? Like what's life in this place look like? What different political parties are there inside the sneaky people? What factions? What do like sneaky people teenagers do to rebel? Do they like go and, I don't know, wear bow ties and try to work in accounting? Or how does that go down? So that was driving me initially. I wanted something with the space to tell a whole world story about a lot of different people who are facing what I was seeing at that point and still do is kind of global challenges that aren't rooted in any one particular dark lord who needs to be defeated or this or that. And that's where it kicked off. And I found myself spinning back to earlier characters and settings more than I was expecting, partially because people were excited to see what was going on with them again, partially because I was interested. I found myself thinking, oh, well, and then what lines that were initially intending to be divergent, I couldn't resist seeding continuity in there, some of which was obvious and some of which I ended up having to edit out in earlier drafts, but was still there in the back of my head. And then meta plot started showing up. So some of it's just the natural urge to tie things together and bring threads to a satisfying narrative conclusion. When you have things in tension, you want resolution. At least I do. It's that sort of long run, it's like that long run Philip Glass thing. Like, we're just going to hold here. You're not going to get the resolution note for the next 45 minutes. And then you get it. So yeah, I think I have paid attention to what excites fans about characters, who they're interested in seeing again, why. I've paid attention to when reception for a book or for a particular character in a book sort of skews differently from my expectation, because you just don't know. The book goes out there in the world. You're not in control of the reading of it. Why did you write it this particular way? Because you had some intimation, something that if you could have said it more simply, you would have said it more simply and more directly. Maybe the reader is smarter than you are in this particular way. They can they're forced to pick up the lexical pieces that have been scattered and make some sense out of them without reference to your explanations or justifications. So then you can sit back.
Ergo, any sci-fi fan in the entire universe.
Yeah, I was about to say,
Yeah,
wait a
right.
minute. I resemble that remark.
I was gonna say sci-fi. I'm a fan of sci-fi, but I've met some so diehard sci-fi fans, and I really appreciate the crap out of them. But man, they will dissect the crap out of something and every subtlety in the world, and you're like, I didn't even intend to do that, you know.
But it's great, right? Like maybe you did on some level, like some deep subconscious level, there's some force that encouraged you, whether it was inattention or whatever, to put the thing on the page, and then somebody jumped off of it. Yeah, fingers crossed. There's also the writerly sleight of hand thing, right? I'm forgetting whose trick this was, but oh man, if I could remember, it would be so good, because this is a science fiction author was pondering writing a book set, a sort of thriller-like near future science fiction book, and was stymied, as many people I know are, about writing the gun bits, because if you want to write like a near future science fictional adventure and it's not, I don't know, set in the world of darkness or something, it's reasonable to expect that a gun will show up at some point. And gun people are notoriously persnickety about how the gun works. It has to have so many rounds, no more, no fewer. No, you don't cock that thing like that. This didn't come out in 1987. It only came out in 1986 and 1988, but not in 1987. So there are people with voluminous Wikipedia levels of gun knowledge, and somehow magically every single one of them reads every book that has a gun in it, and then is after the author on Reddit. This is the sort of the myth, right? And the thriller author who was consulting with our science fiction author friend said, oh, well, here's my way around that. It's absolutely true. But then what you need to do is you just, if you're talking about it's a Walther PK, you just insert the magical word modified.
Yes.
In there.
Yes.
It's a modified Walther PPK. And then all of a sudden, all of that like Wikipedia knowledge is grinding into gear to figure out how you could possibly make a fully automatic Walther PPK with the parts available to this guy in this space. And then they're like really excited and sending you emails. I was thinking about how you could modify and this, that, and the other thing. And then like here gun diagrams, and maybe you're starting to get a little bit nervous, but all you have to say is, oh yeah, that's exactly what I meant. Thanks a lot. That's you got it.
The gunsmith messaged me and told me he was going to do that.
Yeah, right. That's exactly it.
Yep. That's also since I do a lot of history stuff, that's what I have to do, because I know they're going to pick apart anything I put in.
Mm-hmm.
If I mix up one date, if I mix up one thing, it throws away everything, especially since mine's folklore and stuff like that.
Sure.
Because they're really wanting to pick apart, oh, the Mothman sighting happened on Wednesday, not Sunday. What are you
Oh gosh,
about?
yeah, wow.
Yeah, and
that must be intimidating.
It's a little crazy, some of that. So that's when you've got to do so this was told this way, and this is said this way, and this is how I heard it. And then suddenly it's okay, now, because that's exactly how I heard it. That's how I read it, and
that's
like
wonderful,
that. So,
man. Hey, it works for Herodotus, right?
It's
like
the same secret.
That's so cool. I
have a question.
Yeah.
When you were, let's see. So I know Rothfuss recommended you on one of his streams or podcast, and that was what brought you to my attention, because I had missed it. And
it's super cool of him.
When Patrick mentioned something, I gotta pick it up. He got me
for sure
on you and Murderbot Chronicles by Martha Wells at the same time, and I was like,
oh wow,
I was all
tough
sci-fi
competition. That's
great.
I
was sci-fi for 6 months. It was great. So when that happens, had you talked to him? Had you met him before? Is that how it happened, or did he just find you?
So that was, sometimes it's a complete and total surprise. I had met Pat at a small convention called Vericon that used to be, I think it's currently in hiatus mode, even setting aside the pandemic, but used to be put on by the Harvard Radcliffe Science Fiction Association in Cambridge, Massachusetts. So like the Harvard Students Science Fiction Association. And So I was invited as a local author. Pat was invited as the guest of honor, and I'd never met him before. I was extremely, chuffed to be in the same room with him. I loved Name of the Wind. I was like just really curious who this dude was, and we had who else was there? ML Brennan was there. Saladin Ahmed was there. So it was a really cool room to be in. We all ended up playing Small World at some point after one of the convention bands. But in those sorts of situations, at least my read on it is like, be friendly, have as good a conversation as you possibly can. Say at some point when there's an appropriate space, hey, I just really love your books. Thank you so much. Because everybody's going to say it sooner or later, and you kind of have to. If that is your truth, as it was mine. And I kind of left it at that. Like, this is now I think of walking away from that weekend. I was like, what a cool dude. I was really glad that we got to spend that time together. That's something fun. But there was no like conversation around, oh, well, you should read my book or whatever. I assume that he picked up a copy of it because we were hanging out, or in the wake of us hanging out, thought, oh, I'll see what this guy's doing. Maybe he's sort of good. Or at least that was a fun conversation. I do this a lot. And yeah, so it was extremely kind of him to mention it. I saw the Goodreads post that he made about it. Somebody like texted me when it came through. It was really cool.
That's awesome.
You have a lot of fun, oh wow, a whole question's forming, I promise.
No, it's cool. It's cool, man.
I'm thrilled that
I haven't eaten enough, and this whiskey is really running at me. So like, keep it going.
I've accomplished my goal. No, I am so fortunate. We are so fortunate. We get to meet all these amazing authors like yourself. Like, I totally fangirl out. Not as bad as Mark does. Mark is actually taking it down a notch. But we fangirl, and we get to meet some of the most amazing authors like yourself. And we can sit here and we have this thing where, like, when it was presented for you to come on the podcast, I mean, there's all these side conversations nobody gets to hear on the podcast where we're like, oh my God.
Yeah.
And I'm very cool. Like, yeah, it would be cool if you came on the podcast. Like, behind the scenes, we're like totally nerding out. But the one thing I found is I have not once met somebody who is not just an amazing person and amazing to talk to, and not like, oh, you're lucky to talk to me. Let me bring my ego in the room with me. Like, I find writers to be some of the most humble people in a way to talk to, so real, versus, I've done TV stuff, I've done stage, I've done plays. I can meet local authors who literally, cool, you've got a resume that consists of like a little 3-county area, who walk in as if the world is like waiting for them to be there. And I'm like, you've been in 5 plays. Who are you?
Mailman number 2. No.
Exactly. Do you
mean cop?
Yes. Mean cop 1. Did you feel like when you go to these things and you meet these people, do you come in almost with the sense of, you're there, you're gonna have fans come and approach you and stuff, but you're meeting these people that you're like, I love these books.
Oh yeah, totally. It took me a while to be able to wrap my head around it. And I was, oh man, how even to approach this question? It's very strange. It's also strange because I think anyone, even a pretty voracious reader these days, and by these days I mean like the last 25 years, is unlikely to have read everything that's going on in the field, right? Yeah. The sort of, among others, kind of golden age science fiction, not actually golden age, I guess there's new wave science fiction, but that period, you could have conceivably read every single book that came out that was science fiction or fantasy in that year. And that's just not the case now. One of the things, I think this is actually a definition that Joe Walton and Ada Palmer quoted at me once for a golden age, only offering as attribution, because I think it's really cool. It's an age in which everyone who's operating in a field can be aware of and engage with everybody else's work. Like the field needs to have a certain level of technical proficiency, but then you know everyone who's in it. So there's the grand conversation. And right now the field is just a little too big for that. So there's this sort of uneven distribution. There are people who I've met who are delightful humans who sell tons of copies of books who I had never read them when I met them. So they were just, oh, this is a person who I'm having a beer with at a party. That's great. This is cool. What a neat person. And then eventually you find out, oh, wow. Whoa. Okay, cool. That's by far the preferable one for me personally. I just, for a while, I got extremely tongue-tied whenever I would be introduced to someone whose books I just fell over for. The worst example was early on in my career. I had been hunting for something that pushed some of the same circuits in me that I was trying to push with 3 Parts Dead, whether I got there or not. And it had been hard to find something that was in that same vein. And I got a copy of Iron Dragon's Daughter and read it the week before ReaderCon and was just blown away. Like, man, if I can do a 10th of this in a 100th of this in like many books, I will feel like I have accomplished a thing with a capital T here, right? Like, oh, it's like there is oil in this well, that realization. And I was having a beer with a couple of friends, and this guy walks over to the table with I think he had an arrowhead around his neck and then like sort of scraggly gray beard. Oh yeah, this is Michael Swanwick. I'm like, oh. I don't think I spoke for like half an hour. I was just kind of like holding my hand out like a dog waiting for a treat or something. And he like, was perfectly decent, kind, cool human being. I was just in the process of trying to figure out how to speak without being a goon. It's what I ended up doing. And I don't know, maybe what I ended up having to do was like operate in this sort of split universe where there's like the person who wrote the book is on some fundamental level inaccessible to me right now here at this bar. I can meet someone. It's very weird. Do you guys feel this way? Like you meet someone and you've had like a 10-year relationship with them?
All the time.
Yeah.
All the time.
I mean, I guess that is kind of this, right?
It's like we're talking, and, we go way back.
Yeah.
Well, I think that partially has to do with the comfortability with yourself and being able to be there and enjoy the thing. I think, I've had fangirl moments on me, right? Yeah. And I will say that I love the enthusiasm and the energy, but it's almost like they're not having a conversation with me because they're like talking at me really fast about what they're excited about.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? Yeah, and you're like...
And then you got imposter syndrome just boiling all the time anyway. So you're sitting there going, wait, why are you in line for me when this guy over here has been on 12 TV shows and all that? And
did you see George R. R. Martin is like right over there?
Yeah,
he's right there. He's right there. Alan Kushner is right there.
But and I think it's amazing because those are the people that blog about you and talk about you and make their friends and buy your books and give them to their family over Christmas. Like those are those guys. But I think at the same time, if every single person came at you like that, it would be very hard to sit down and just have a conversation with somebody. And I think that, because a book is not necessarily, you're not a TV star when you're a book, and not the same thing. You're just not a TV star when you're an author, meaning your face is not always everywhere, and I think there are some authors, that I've talked, like Pierce Anthony is one of my favorite authors in the entire world. I love Pierce Anthony, who, by the way, said as soon as COVID's over, I can go to his tree farm, which is in Florida, and interview him.
Oh, amazing.
Yes.
Excellent.
I just can't be responsible for killing Pierce Anthony with COVID.
No, so we can't do that.
No. Yeah.
But he thought the whole concept of me coming out to his house and interviewing him on his tree farm, he was like, I can't use the internet, but if you want to come out here and do it, that's cool. And I was like, this fucking Pierce Anthony just told me I could come to his house.
Dude, that's awesome.
you know,
Do it. I
and
mean, once it's safe, but do it.
once it's safe,
Yeah.
I'm not going to kill Pierce Anthony.
Yeah,
so-
that was our problem, is we were getting Ben Bova, and now, you know, that
Oh
happened.
gosh.
So
Oh,
it was,
I'm
yeah,
sorry.
we did his last book signing at a bookstore down here in St. Petersburg that I help out at. And we had him last year, and they got an award and all this, and we were like, great. And he was going to come back this year, and I was going to get Erica, you know, we were going to go interview him there.
Yeah.
And, you know, well, things happen.
Gosh,
So
what a
he's
loss.
gone to travel beyond the stars. And
That's right.
and what an amazing man, though. And it's just like, and so that's where we're like, well, we can't do that to Piers.
No, to Pierce. You can't do that to Pierce. But what's interesting, I think, and different is when you sit down and you talk to the welcomeness that can happen, you know. I just think that's amazing, and I found that.
Well, I have too. I mean, I think I love it. I mean, authors have been extremely kind to me. I try to pay that forward to readers and to fans who come up. I think there are a few things going on there. When I started off, I got very, like, as a sort of survival mechanism, I could feel a tendency to be kind of dismissive of my own work, or like, oh yeah, it's fine, you know, thanks so much, it's great to meet you. Because as you say, you're aware that, I don't know, my first signing, that was my first sort of not at a local bookstore signing, was at New York Comic Con, and it was me, and then there was Kim Harrison, and then there's Kim Harrison's line, and I was right next to Jacqueline Carey, and then there's her line, and her line was full of extremely eager goth-looking young women who are going up and talking to her about, like, your books changed my life. And I was like, oh man, you know, I signed 5. That was cool. I was very happy with myself. But you know, so you sort of start building a sense of perspective to survive. But then the reader's relationship is with you and it isn't with you. Like, in the same way that you are not actually, even though you're the same sort of meat puppety kind of entity that was involved in doing the actual typing for your books, there's the lines of the books converge on an author that's not exactly the same person as is sitting at the convention table. Yeah. Your books can be wiser than you by a great deal. They probably are. Your books can be smarter than you. If nothing else, your books are your attempt to condense 9 months to a year of your life into something that an average reader will experience in 8 to 14 hours. So think about how engaging, cool, fun to hang out with, kind, generous you could possibly focus yourself to be in a whole year for a day. If you could condense all of that into one day, that's the person that your reader is meeting. And your job, so in a way, you're like a vessel for that, as the person who's present at a signing or in a conversation. You know, you've participated in the creation of this book, and the reader has done a lot of other heavy lifting. And your job, as, at least this is how I see my job, as the person who's present in the signing or in the panel or whatever, is to respect the experience that the readers had, and like be generous and allow them to have the moment of connection with this thing that you are involved with but aren't completely co-eval with. Does that make any sense?
No, it totally does. I
100%.
mean, I think it's the point that people fall in love with your work. They generally don't know you. Like,
Right.
There's some authors that are very good about the social media and you can get to know them and stuff, but they don't, no matter how much they think they know you as an author.
Yeah, and everybody has a line, you know. Even people
Yeah.
who are extremely on social media have lines. I know authors who I once thought of as being very public and shary with their lives on social media, to the extent that it made me uncomfortable. And then I would meet them in person and realize that there were elements of their life that were completely off grid, that were never mentioned. Even when stuff that I would think of personally as being, you know, very sensitive would be mentioned, there's other stuff that was just completely off grid. So yeah, it's weird. There is that parasocial relationship that people develop with authors and with I don't know, YouTube people. It's interesting. and I don't think there's anything wrong with it so long as everybody involved recognizes that the public facing entity is not really the same thing as the fleshy person who hopes and sweats and fears and makes ramen noodles and whose job is to sort of create the persona.
Yes, and who writes the book in their pajama pants that they haven't changed in 3 days.
Yeah, that's right. Right. And like sometimes the book that you're writing is
4
like,
days.
you got to figure that Dashiell Hammett, who's writing these books about people in like impeccably tailored, I was just rereading The Thin Man over Christmas, like you do, right?
Classic.
And so you gotta figure that like all of these suits and all of these cocktails and all of these extremely swanky hotel bars and parties and the speakeasies and that whole universe, and Dashiell Hammett sitting there in the 1927 equivalent of like sweatpants, banging the thing out, like 2 cigarettes at the same time, that doesn't change. I think
the classic, the boxers and the fedora and the underwear,
right?
shirt.
Oh, and like sometimes this is the thing that I think is kind of pernicious for young writers coming up, is that sometimes sometimes there are not exactly lies, but like exaggerations or mythologizations of the composition process that sneak in.
Yeah.
The big one that springs to mind is Kerouac and the On the Road scroll, right? So the myth, of course, is that Jack Kerouac wrote all of On the Road in a single draft on Benzedrine, listening to bebop music on the radio on a big scroll of butcher paper. And there is some truth to that in that the scroll of butcher paper exists, but he'd written like 6 complete drafts of it beforehand. I see you guys nodding. I just, in case anybody out here doesn't know the story.
In case they don't know. Yeah.
Exactly. He'd written like 6-7 drafts of it beforehand. He'd gotten those drafts extensively critiqued after the butcher paper scroll was done. It was heavily edited. So there's truth in there. But the truth is not, if you want to write On the Road, what you should do is get yourself a scroll of butcher paper and some Benzedrine and just go too.
I think it's the reader fans more than the writer fans that go, I like the mystique or the mystery around the idea of this situation.
Yeah, that's a very good point.
Super excited about how they think you do it, and don't realize again that we're sitting in pajama pants for 4 days. And we have plates around us, and we maybe have gone through a few bottles of wine, and voila, some of the story erupts out of us. And then there's the stuff that we put together. Like one of my favorite parts, and I was talking to a friend of mine yesterday who's an author about this point, is we talk about the little bits, and the little bits are the connective tissue that we put into a book sometimes that are just connective tissue to us. We've got to get from A to B, so we throw this thing in there. And then some fan thinks that little piece of connective tissue or that one barista at the thing or whatever the crap, that little dot, that speck, is like
tapped on the map with the spider web.
Yeah. Oh God. Yeah. That's the secret. That's the secret to it all.
That's it. That one word.
Yeah. Oh man.
It was an and instead of an and that's it. It makes all the difference. Oh,
galaxy brain moment.
Yeah.
Exactly. And they literally come up to you and start talking about this, and you're like, what?
Mm-hmm.
Like, and of course you can't disavow and go, I have no idea what you're talking about.
Sometimes
they think we've memorized all of our books. Like, they think
right. Like, I don't remember writing that line. Sometimes they do, but yeah, I mean, sometimes it's the fan sees the empty space that they can pour themselves into, right? I think part of the attraction of an extremely systematized epic fantasy universe is that you can see exactly you can imagine what your character would be, or the kind of person you would be in that situation. As a kid, I loved, and still do to this day, love the Robert Jordan books, in part because as big as that world is, you can also very clearly imagine, like, my story character would be like, maybe he's like a Shan monster rider, but isn't cool with like the Shan stuff, and he's going to run away and join join like Rands, and you can have there's this more. There's like a lexical world that you can enter. You can start thinking about descriptors for characters, like who someone would anchor onto, areas that the narrative doesn't touch, but that still exist because the lines of the world building point there.
You think that's
and that's a way for a fan to push themselves in. Or, you know, I stumbled into MCU fan fiction on AO3 a while ago and was shocked by how central Darcy, who is the Natalie Portman's grad student from Thor and Thor the Dark World, played by Kat Dennings, I think. So how central Darcy is to like a huge chunk of the fandom, and it's because she's not a terribly created character. Kat Dennings does an amazing job of giving, like, she's got great comic chops and she's a really fun person, but she's fundamentally just like a grad student person who makes snarky comments and is great at that. But then that's something that the fandom can sort of enter or identify with. Somebody who, a way to see yourself in the story.
Yeah, no, I agree. Okay, so I had a good question. Yes, gaming, because we're getting near the end of at least round one of the podcast. Do you still game? Because you mentioned a lot of games. I actually played the Sword of Truth role-playing game.
Oh, wow. Okay, excellent.
Like, I'm major nerd cred. I'm actually playing a role-playing game with Dan Wells tomorrow.
Oh, cool.
Dan Wells has started GMing games during the pandemic because he
That's
wants
amazing.
to be creative, which is ridiculous.
Oh, man.
Plus,
I'm jelly.
I get to play a role-playing game with Dan Wells. So that
yeah, that's super cool. I'm so glad. I am so glad that like professional and semi-pro GMing is a thing that exists now.
Yes,
It's so great. It's
yeah, anyway, I interviewed him. He's like, I do this thing. And I'm like, what? Let all of my nerdom fly. No. Do you still game at all?
I do, yeah. More than I did before the pandemic, actually, because everybody's being in houses all the time makes a certain kind of scheduling easier, even though we can't game in person.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've been an active tabletop gamer since high school, and even before that, I was like, didn't have anybody to play with, but was eagerly reading the second edition rule books and, you know, Davis Kid back in Nashville, Tennessee, when that still existed, of blessed memory.
Mage.
Yeah. I mean, it was. I love role playing. Role playing is sort of where a lot of my storytelling instincts come from and come back to. That feeling of wanting to create a world that engages players who are readers, wanting to keep a story driving forward so they have some place to go, understanding what their expectations might be so that you can subvert them or play off of them, making sure people have a good time. That's whenever I start to feel my writing pulling in a I don't know, there's sort of the black hole of like endless contemplation. Yeah, am I doing this, that, the other thing? Just it's centering for me to run a game. To play in somebody else's game is great. To run a game is like the best thing, because then you remember when you see somebody's eyes light up, like, oh, that thing, I want to try to ride that. You're like, oh, this is why. There are a lot of reasons people tell stories and engage with stories, but like, you can see all of them at a good table. In the course of even a very straightforward, you know, the mayor's cat is missing and you need to track it down to the dragon lair kind of story. Like, it's great. It's what we have in the modern world in place of firesides and tall tale telling. I really think that's true.
And I think it's amazing because I have a friend that wrote it's a 4-book series. It's 3 books and then like a compendium of short stories that was based on a Dungeons and Dragons game we played.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it was amazing. And it's a vampire romance set in a fantasy time because her character got changed into a vampire, long story. But
excellent.
What was really amazing in reading it is for those of us that were in the game, i.e. me, one of the people, and reading it's such a great fantasy story. Like, it's a fantasy vampire, elven, like there's all the, you know, all the elements, goblins, you know, it starts in the middle of a goblin war. It's great. But it's funny because when I started reading it and I was like, oh, this is really, and I got to this one character and I was like, wait a minute, is this me? And
that's great. Yeah.
But it was so much fun to see the creativity and what she did with it, because it didn't play exactly along the lines of the Dungeons, you know, it went a different direction. But I think that sort of creative outlet, however that creative outlet works for a person, is phenomenal. And I think people underrate how much imagination goes into tabletop gaming.
Oh, of course, absolutely. I mean, I think there's a trope or a conversational topos that I think is maybe a little regrettable of sort of putting down like, oh, this is just your D&D campaign as a book, like, which I engage in myself sometimes. But I think what people mean by that is there is a glorious and live thing about playing in a good tabletop campaign. There's a feeling of spontaneity and energy and improvisation and generosity that can very easily get lost in the transposition to books if you just try to write everything down. And because they're very different media, you don't have the players there to feed off of. You don't have the theatrical focus and energy. You don't have copious quantities of Mountain Dew or whatever. And so it is sometimes tricky to make that translation, but it's storytelling. It's all storytelling at rock bottom, and wonderful things can grow out of tabletop gaming. Yep. I mean, the Empress of Forever is like, it's not an adaptation of a game that I ran, but it's explicitly dedicated to the good question, which is the ship of the Star Wars game that I was running all through college.
Very nice.
It's connecting on that level.
Very cool. Okay, because we have to wrap up. What is advice you would give to authors? I don't say young authors or new authors. Advice you would give to authors out there, like the nugget, the gem, the little pinnacle of truth. What are we telling them? Without
really
being too difficult of a question.
No. It's not too difficult. It's just like thinking about one. Man.
Say whatever you want. It's your podcast.
Okay. Yeah. No. Sure. Here.
Go ahead.
This is the closest thing I can come to I think what I think is a piece of universal advice. It's finish things. Yes. Whatever it is you're doing, whatever it is you're working on, finish it. Get to the end of it. Why do I say this? Because writing endings is a skill, just like writing beginnings, just like writing middles. Endings are often under discussed, I think, in craft advice, and especially in like how to get an agent, how to get published kind of advice, because frankly, they're not a part of the book that most agents are going to look at. They're not even a part of the book because the agents will be looking at the first 50 pages or even the first 3 to determine whether they're hooky enough, whether the chops are there. They're a part that's very hard to edit well, because a proper ending, a good ending, is bringing so many threads of the narrative and so many threads of the subtext and the sort of deep structure together that trying to unpick that or figure out what's wrong with it is often an issue of like finding something that's going on 300-400 pages earlier in the book. And like any endings are a skill like any other. The more you've practiced it, the better you will get at it, the more comfortable you will get at it, and the more you will learn when you are 2/3 of the way through the book or halfway or a third. It happens to a different person with every project, but it generally happens in a similar place to most writers I've talked to. And you're thinking, this is impossible. I will never finish this. It's undoable. You'll realize, oh, I've been here before. And you'll be able to stop, take a deep breath, and find your way through. And I guess that's the other piece of advice, which is just take that deep breath when you find yourself stuck.
I think that is brilliant advice. Brilliant.
Thank you.
You are most welcome. Okay, so if people want to find your work, I know that you're not prevalent on a couple of the social medias, but
not recently. Well, we had our first kid 2 years ago, and it's been an amazing ride, but I've had to make some pretty sharp triage decisions about how my time gets spent, especially in the pandemic without access to a lot of outside childcare. So I'm not on social media a lot, but I am there at Max Gladstone on Twitter and max.gladstone, I think, on Instagram. So if people want to follow me in the events that I start posting more, I do still post like career announcements and things on there. I also have an email newsletter that's only for announcements right now on my website, maxgladstone.com. And soon, once I get through this revision that I'm working on next week, hopefully, I'm thinking about starting a content newsletter, which will be a good way to return to the, excitable blogging about science fiction topics and writing content, which I'll be posting probably for the first time on my announcement newsletter, and then I'll be running it off of a separate Substack. But that's the big plan right now.
There you go. Sign up for the newsletter then.
Yeah. Sign up for the newsletter.
Details.
I did.
I love it.
Thank you.
See, that is the fanboy. He's repressed it a lot on this. I'm giving him max cred for it, but
it's
he's
the
like, I
medication.
signed up for your
It's his
newsletter.
job.
I'm sorry if you've wanted to ask me anything and I've been like,
No,
I've been
he'll
just...
get a chance on rapid fire questions. in the
Okay,
next
rapid
episode,
fire. Fantastic.
Because I fail horribly at that. Okay, so you have been wonderful to have on. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been delightful.
Absolutely. Okay, so this has been Drinking with Authors. I've been your host, Erica Lance.
And I've been Mark Muncy from Erie, Florida.
And our guest has been Max Gladstone. And we will see you next time.
All right. See you next time.